Under the glowing lights of America's Got Talent, a young Filipino boy named Miguel Santos stepped nervously onto the stage. At just 12 years old, he was small compared to the grandness of the moment, yet there was something about the calm in his eyes that hinted at something extraordinary. The crowd was buzzing, curious about this child who had come all the way from Cebu City, Philippines, carrying nothing but a dream and a love for music. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the microphone. The judges, Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Howie Mandel, and Heidi Klum, looked on, intrigued. Simon tilted his head, his usual skeptical expression forming as he asked, "So, Miguel, what will you be singing for us today?" The boy took a deep breath, smiled shyly, and replied, "I'll be singing Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis Presley." The mention of Elvis sparked a murmur through the crowd. Another Elvis song, Simon thought to himself, perhaps another tribute that might sound ordinary. But there was something gentle and pure in the boy's tone that made Simon sit up a little straighter. The music began softly, the familiar melody of love and nostalgia that had touched generations. Miguel closed his eyes, and in that moment, the stage lights seemed to fade into the background. His voice emerged, tender yet powerful, each note resonating with emotion far beyond his years. "Wise men say, only fools rush in," he sang, his accent carrying a delicate Filipino warmth that made the lyrics feel new again. The audience fell silent almost immediately. Even Simon, known for his unshakable composure, leaned forward in his seat. There was something magical about the way this boy sang, not as someone copying Elvis, but as someone who felt the song deep in his soul. His voice floated through the air, trembling with honesty, as if he was singing directly to every heart in the room. As the chorus arrived, Miguel's confidence grew. His small hands gripped the microphone stand tighter, his eyes opened, shining under the spotlight. "Take my hand, take my whole life too," he sang, and his voice carried a power that no one expected from such a young boy. The camera panned across the audience, people wiping tears, holding their breath, captivated by the feeling he brought alive. It wasn't just a song anymore, it was a memory, a revival, a soul reborn on stage. When Miguel reached the final line, there was a heartbeat of silence before the crowd erupted in applause. Every single person stood, clapping and cheering, many with tears in their eyes. Simon Cowell, usually the hardest to impress, smiled, a rare, genuine smile. He turned to his fellow judges and said softly, "That wasn't an imitation. That was real." Miguel stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed, until Simon gestured for him to take a bow. The boy did, his eyes filled with tears of joy. For that brief moment, under the lights of AGT, in a city far from home, a Filipino boy from Cebu had brought Elvis Presley's spirit back to life. The applause seemed endless as Miguel stood on the stage, trembling with emotion. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his hands still gripping the microphone stand. The crowd's cheers grew louder and louder until the theater felt like it might burst with energy. The camera zoomed in on Simon Cowell, who was now standing, smiling proudly, an expression rarely seen on his face. Miguel blinked back tears, overwhelmed by what had just happened. For a moment, he couldn't believe the audience was cheering for him, a simple boy from Cebu City, Philippines. He looked toward the judges' panel, unsure what to expect next. Simon raised his hand, signaling for quiet. The noise began to fade until the room was filled only with the sound of Miguel's soft breathing. Simon's voice broke the silence. "You know, Miguel, he began slowly, his tone unusually gentle. "I've heard hundreds of people try to sing Elvis, but you didn't copy him. You gave us his heart again." The audience erupted once more, clapping and shouting in agreement. Miguel's eyes widened as Simon continued, "That was one of the most beautifully emotional performances I've heard in a long time. You reminded us why that song is timeless." Sofia Vergara smiled brightly and added, "You are so young, but your voice feels old and wise, like it has lived 1,000 stories." "I felt every word." Heidi Klum nodded enthusiastically, saying, "It was like Elvis himself came back through you, Miguel." Howie Mandel leaned forward with a grin, "You're not just singing, you're feeling, and that's what makes an artist." Miguel's mother, watching from backstage, covered her mouth in disbelief, tears streaming down her cheeks. The camera captured her whispering, "That's my son, that's my Miguel." Simon turned to the other judges and asked, "Shall we vote?" The crowd began chanting, "Yes. Yes. Yes." But before any formal vote could happen, Simon raised his hand again and pressed the golden buzzer. In an instant, golden confetti rained from the ceiling, swirling around Miguel as he stood frozen in shock. The audience roared louder than ever before. Miguel looked up, his eyes filling with tears as he realized what had just happened. He had earned the golden buzzer. Simon walked up to the stage and placed a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder. "You deserve this," he said softly. "You reminded us that true music doesn't need fame, it just needs heart." Miguel wiped his tears, smiling shyly through the glittering rain of gold. The judges stood and clapped as the young boy's dream began to shine before the world. That night, on the grand stage of America's Got Talent, Simon Cowell, the toughest critic of all, had been touched by a young Filipino boy who sang not to impress, but to make the world feel. Backstage, the noise from the theater still echoed like distant thunder. Miguel stood there, covered in bits of golden confetti, clutching the golden buzzer trophy in disbelief. His mother rushed toward him, her eyes full of tears, and pulled him into a tight hug. "You did it, Anak, my child," she whispered, her voice trembling with pride. Miguel could barely speak. "Mama, Simon liked me," he said softly, his voice cracking. She smiled through her tears, brushing his hair from his forehead. "He didn't just like you," she said, "he believed in you." The crew backstage applauded as Miguel took a seat, still trying to process everything. It felt like a dream, one he never wanted to end. That night, clips of his performance began spreading across social media. Within hours, his name, Miguel Santos, the Filipino Elvis, was trending all over YouTube and Twitter. Millions watched the video of the little boy from Cebu singing, "Can't Help Falling in Love," with such raw emotion that even Simon Cowell had stood in awe. Comments poured in, "This gave me chills, he sings from the soul, Elvis would be proud." News outlets in the Philippines picked up the story, calling him Cebu's golden voice. Reporters gathered outside his home, eager to speak to the humble boy who had just made global history on one of the world's biggest stages. The next day, Simon Cowell appeared in a post-show interview. Sitting with a thoughtful expression, he said, "Every once in a while, a performance reminds us why we do this show." Miguel didn't just sing an Elvis song, he brought Elvis's spirit back to life. "I saw something pure, something real." Talent doesn't belong to one place or one age, it can come from anywhere, even a young boy from Cebu who sings with his heart. The clip of Simon's words was shared millions of times, further fueling the love for Miguel's story. Weeks later, Miguel returned home to the Philippines, where an entire crowd awaited him at Cebu International Airport. Children held signs that read, "Welcome home, our Elvis," and "We're proud of you, Miguel." As he stepped into the arrival hall, tears filled his eyes once again. Reporters surrounded him, but Miguel's response was simple: "I just wanted people to remember Elvis and to smile when they hear his song." That innocence melted hearts across the world. Months passed, yet the memory of that performance remained as powerful as ever. Miguel continued to perform, but he always carried the same humble smile that won everyone's hearts. For Simon Cowell and millions around the world, the young boy from Cebu wasn't just another contestant, he was proof that real talent, real emotion, and real music never die. Through one unforgettable song, a Filipino boy had made the world fall in love all over again.